All right, we'll give it a few minutes to give folks a chance to log in. All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica from Greenlight and we are thrilled to host tonight's event with Touré presenting his new book, Nothing Compares to You, An Oral History of Prince. He's going to be talking with Susannah Melvoin, so you are in for an excellent time tonight. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Touré, Susannah, and the team at Permuted Press for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. Though we're not able to host events in our store spaces right now, our community of authors and readers is still here. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. A couple little housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see and hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple different ways you can interact with the speakers and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage. The first one is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like a speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat throughout the event. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees. If you have a specific question you'd like to have answered by the author, please post that question in the Q&A module. You can find it by clicking on the icon that looks like two speech balloons. We'll be pulling questions from the Q&A to be answered in the later part of the program. And very importantly, tonight's featured book, Nothing Compares to You, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person at our bookstore locations, 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. every day of the week, and you can purchase Touré's book and many others on site. Or order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup at the store or for shipping anywhere in the US. I'll drop the buy link in the chat in a moment. If you care about supporting the careers of authors and the ongoing existence of independent bookstores, buying tonight's featured book is a great way to show your support. Okay, some introductions. Our interviewer tonight is Susannah Melvoin. She's a singer and songwriter who's been working in music since she was 8 years old. She's done session work with legends including Quincy Jones, Donna Summer, Patti Austin, Seal, Roger Waters, and Prince. In the 80s, she worked with Prince as a staff vocalist for all of his side projects, including co-lead vocalist for The Family, a group that would have a top 10 R&B hit with Screams of Passion. She was also a backup singer for Prince and the Revolution, and she contributed background and vocal arrangements on at least 50 Prince songs. She co-wrote Prince's iconic Starfish and Coffee. She's also written songs for Madonna, Eric Clapton, and B.B. King, so we're grateful to have her with us tonight. She's going to be speaking with our featured author, Touré. He's the author of 6 books, including the Prince biography, I Would Die For You, Why Prince Became an Icon. He's the host of the podcast docuseries Who Was Prince and the twice-weekly podcast Touré Show, which has over 3 million downloads. He was a co-host of MSNBC's The Cycle and a host at MTV2 and BET, as well as a correspondent at CNN. He grew up a devout Prince fan, and among his greatest life moments are interviewing Prince, attending the private after show where Prince played with D'Angelo and Questlove, and of course, playing one-on-one basketball with Prince at Paisley Park. Touré's also a longtime friend and supporter of Greenlight Bookstore. He actually spoke at our opening party on October 2009, so we're so grateful to have him back on our virtual stage to talk about this new book. Nothing Compares to You, to which Susannah actually wrote the foreword, is an oral history built from years of interviews with dozens of people who are in Prince's inner circle, all providing unique insights into the man and the musician. This revelatory book is a deeply personal and candid discussion of who Prince really was, emotionally, professionally, and romantically. So Touré is going to set us up with a few words about the book, and then he and Susannah will be talking about it and about Prince in general, and they're happy to take your questions as well towards the end. So please join me in welcoming Touré and Susannah.
Thank you, Jess, so much. So glad to see Greenlight still rocking strong in these crazy times. In one way or another, I've been working on this book, Nothing Compares to You, for about 15 years. I interviewed Prince. It went okay. I said, I need more. I don't have enough of this story. And then I went back to Paisley Park and it ended up playing basketball with him at Paisley Park. And over time, I wrote a book about him called I Would Die For You. And through that experience, and after that experience, I met Susannah. I met her sister, Wendy. I met, other people in the Prince world, and just had a sort of ongoing conversation with them, just out of basic curiosity for somebody who I loved and admired and was curious about. And those conversations blossomed into more and more. I'm meeting more people from Prince world. And eventually it was like, well, I have like all this information and all these interviews and all these quotes, and can we fashion them into a book? And starting to do that led to even more conversations and more interviews and meeting more people in Prince's world. And I feel like I developed a really deep sense of understanding of the arc of his life. And I want to get into some of that. And a big part of why I've been able to really understand him is because of my friendship with the amazing Susannah, who has just helped me understand a lot about music and as well about Prince in specific. And Suze, I want to just talk to you about Prince and about music and definitely about one of your favorite subjects in the world, your sister Wendy, who is your twin and perhaps your closest person in the world. And she helps transform Prince's music. Her and your other sister from another mother, Lisa Coleman. Lisa joins the band first as a keyboardist. And there's an interesting story about how Wendy joins the band. And more than that, when your father is one of the great session players of the 60s. So you guys came to the table, even as teenagers, with an amazing musical education, amazing chops, amazing understanding of music. So when Wendy is getting to know Prince, she's the youngest one in the revolution, but she is able to transform him musically. And this is part of why Purple Rain sounds so different than everything that came before it. Can you talk a little bit about how their musical relationship started, Prince and Wendy, and how she transforms him musically?
Sure. Thank you. It's great to be here, and I want to, like, the book is great, and I'm so happy to share these stories. I do want to say that Lisa's dad was also a session player. Our fathers were session players together. So Lisa came with a pedigree that started it. So, and we all played music together as babies. And so it started in our homes playing music. So when Lisa became part of his band, when Wendy was invited to visit Lisa on a gig, it just happened that Wendy was playing guitar in the hotel room, and Prince was walking down the hallway, and he hears what's going on in Lisa's room, and knock, 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 knock. Can I come in? And she's sitting on the bed playing guitar, and he's like, keep playing. And Lisa says, play some of that stuff. You know what I'm talking about. Like, pull out those chords, because Wendy's got these enormous hands like my father did, like a span. Like, she could, the neck of the guitar becomes like a keyboard. Like, she can just get these massive chords. So she just starts playing all this sort of like crazy Brazilian chords, and he was just taken by that. I mean, that started the little bit of the interest. Cut to sound check, and they're at sound check, and apparently Des didn't make that sound check, or was late, or
Des
I don't know the
Dickerson.
exact story about that. Des Dickerson, his original guitar player. And over the mic, Wendy, do you know how to play Controversy? She was like, yeah, can you come up here and play sound check? So she goes up, and she's 19. She picks up his guitar, he hands her the guitar, and he goes out into the house to listen to the house sound and starts getting all of the monitors right, getting the house sound together. And that was the moment where it was like, things changed for him. He was like, he saw something else, in his mind. Bobby used to say this as well, that like he wanted his Fleetwood Mac. And I think at that moment, things were becoming realized. He's had these visions of how he wanted it to progress. So I think that was a real moment, and he saw there was a musical pedigree. And so for Prince, your musicality was the most important when he would to play with you. Like, what are you bringing to the recipe? Like, what is your part of this? Like, don't just imitate, or don't think like, there's a bravado that he gravitates towards. Like, how well do you know your instrument? How well do you know your history? How well do you know other people's history? That's all very, very, very important. And luckily, you know, we come from that kind of musical life. Our parents, we just were enveloped in a musical world. Our schools were all musical. We just, you know, the kids were always in the studio banging on anything that they could get on their hands on and playing with weird like synthesizers, because Gary, Lisa's dad, was, you know, one of the original Moog synthesizer, you know, wizards in his studio and plugging shit in and like just making things happen. And we were doing everything we can, from like seances to like crazy music in the dungeon of the house. Like it was either their house or our house. And the kind of music that we all listened to ran the gamut. You know, like we were listening to, you know, Stockhausen to, you know, to Bob Marley to, you know, to, you know, I mean, it's I'm blanking on it, but, you know, it's just filled.
Everything.
And it was clear that that's the kind of pedigree that was happening there.
Do you have
So,
you have a sense of the sort of things that she might have sonically, that she might have introduced Prince to or asked him to think about that led to Purple Rain? Because Purple Rain has a unique sound as opposed to Controversy in 1999.
yes, well, that there's a story behind how he wrote, how that came to be. So, I mean, if we go a little bit further, when Wendy's finally in the band, um, because of the musical pedigree and because of the jazz background that Wendy had, and also Lisa had, classical and jazz, that the chord structures that they brought to the music, you know, instead of three chord, you know, blues or three chord R&B or three, just, you know, sort of like simple song structure, it became like how to revoice things, like, and revoicing, you know, a specific melody was mind blowing, I think, in a lot of ways. Prince was hearing things, you know, with way more color to it. And so he had been messing around with Purple Rain, a kind of version of Purple Rain, but brought it to rehearsal. And it wasn't until Wendy, that first guitar, like it brings us right back to that, the first chord that she plays on the guitar opened up the voicing of all of that. You know, like it became a bigger, rounder, more colorful musical expression. It's not to say that Prince, you know, that Wendy and Lisa were, and the rest of the band were only responsible for that. I mean, Prince brought that all. It was what Wendy and Lisa brought, and particularly Wendy as a guitar player brought a really wide voicing on the guitar, different structure to how you heard a chord. So it was very jazz, very Brazilian, so like deep jazz, like, you know, weird, augmented, crazy, you know, strange chords, but beautiful. So incredibly emotive. And so, and that brought a lot. And that's why I think things started to change dramatically musically for him, because that, I mean, that's a language in itself, right? Music language. And for Prince, that's how he communicated, was through music. And to learn this new language, not that he didn't know it, I'm sure he knew it and he can pick up all that stuff, but in terms of his, you know, his instinctual musical style, it was different than what Wendy brought and what Lisa brought, you know. And I'm sure what everyone else since Wendy and Lisa and everybody else in the band, I mean, all of his bands after this, they were all had incredible jazz backgrounds and could play all this stuff. So I think that that was the beginning of all of that wide experiential music.
One more thing within that vein, because Wendy and Lisa are not the only people who have a significant impact on him. Your brother Jonathan and Lisa's brother David had a huge impact on him as well. I didn't realize until doing this book that Around the World in a Day, the album that comes after Purple Rain, was completed before Purple Rain was released. As an outsider, I thought Around the World in a Day is his response to the world accepting him as this gigantic celebrity. And like, I want to do a different, more philosophical statement now that I've had this. No, Around the World in a Day is completed before Purple Rain comes out. And the key influence is a song that your brother and Lisa's brother brings to him.
Right. So after the filming was done and after the album was done for Purple Rain, there was a period of time that's like a downtime, and that there is no downtime for Prince. There's just never downtime, right? So that, when, whatever, the film companies and like, okay, we got to set up the date for release and blah, blah, blah. There's that time that's open. So we're going in the studio, set up a huge warehouse in Eden Prairie, and that's where everything was recorded. And it just so happened when in rehearsal, we had all been here in Los Angeles where we live, and my brother and David were writing partners and had been since we were all little kids. Anyway, they were in the studio and they had written this song, Around the World in a Day. It's David's lyric melody, and it's got his vibe because David plays oud and all of these world instruments, and my brother helped arrange and write the music to it. So they bring in Wendy and Lisa, myself, and Lisa's sister Cole, where years later we became a band of our own. But like the four girls went in to do all the background vocals on Around the World in a Day, that moment. So that's on the original and of the song, and bring it to Minneapolis when we're doing they're in rehearsals, and I'm going out there because I'm doing some, I want to say, family stuff. I'm not even sure what the time frame was at that particular time, but it was close to that. They played it for Prince in the car. It was a tape, and it was just, he heard it and he said, "Can I have it?" And it was like, let me ask David and Jonathan, let's find out how they feel about it. It was a quick phone call, and they were like, sure, that's fantastic. And it was in the studio, and boom, and that was it. So Around in the World in the Day, that record started with Around the World in a Day, that song. So and then it pulled a whole moment. And so that had to wait until the tour was done to release it.
One more in this vein, and then I want to talk about the larger scope of the book. But there's a question already coming in, which is really important, and another one of your favorite stories. And you've been telling me these stories for years. I Starfish and Coffee was just this weird song that I heard in 10th, 11th grade, and I'm like, what is this weirdo thing? I have I can't make sense of it. I love it. I love Prince as a little kid, that whole vision. It's a very sweet and loving song, but I don't understand it. What is he talking about? And then I meet you. You co-wrote the song. It's your life story. It's a little bit of your memoir, and it's real. It's the most trippy, weirdo song maybe in Prince's whole oeuvre, but it's real.
Yes, it's very real. It doesn't get any more real. And that's, like life imitating art or art imitating life. It's like that. No, this was it. This was like.
And you still know Cynthia Rose.
I'm still very good friends with Cynthia. Cynthia calls me on the regular to check in and to tell me about her day and just, to see how everyone's doing and checking in. And she's remarkable. She is it's as if time stood still for her. She's still a 12-year-old girl. But I used to tell him stories about Cynthia. This went on for years. I would tell him stories about this young girl I went to elementary school with, Cynthia Rose.
Because she's autistic, but in the 70s, we did not use that term. We did not think about that.
We did not use those. No, we didn't know. She was just an extraordinary child. And I had a deep love for her, and still do. I didn't see her as different. As a matter of fact, I actually related to her, and her kind of like, she was sort of the outsider. We were always the last to be picked on any sports team. It was like, there's Cynthia and Susannah. Who was going to pick us on like dodgeball or like kickball or whatever, capture the flag? It was like me and Cynthia. And so I just, like we'd sit with each other at lunchtime all the time, and she'd open up her lunchbox and she'd share what was in her lunchbox. Hence, the lunchbox in the song. I mean, a lot of the song has all these references to my experience with Cynthia. And one of these experiences that I would tell Prince about was that we would stand in line every morning to greet our teacher, Miss Kathleen, Kathy Smith. And every morning, this is every morning.
And Wendy's name is in the song.
Oh yeah, we're all in it. All
Yep.
the Kevin, Lucy. Lucy was Miss Smith's daughter. There's all the names in the song are all the kids that were in our school. Kevin, Lucy.
But what did Cynthia Rose? Cynthia Rose did not say to you that she had starfish and coffee for breakfast. That is not what she had for breakfast.
No, so this it's a great story. So in 1986, Prince and I were just recently engaged, and we just got this house near Paisley Park. While Paisley Park was being built, we had just bought this house. I had finished, like sort of decorating and redoing this home for when he came back from doing his stuff for Cherry Moon. And it was one morning, he said, why don't you write down everything you've told me about Cynthia? So it became like a writing day. Like all morning I was at the kitchen table. Susan was downstairs getting tape ready.
Susan
and
Rogers.
I was writing down everything about like what I had told him in the years prior about Cynthia. This is everything, including, guess what I had for breakfast? And I would say, what'd you have for breakfast, Cynthia? This is every day. And she goes, I had starfish and pee-pee. And I'd be like, starfish and pee-pee. Okay. It's like, it was just always like starfish and pee-pee. Like none of the other kids, we were like, oh God, starfish and pee-pee. Like nobody, like, okay. But this was every day, right? And so I write everything down, and
20 was her favorite number.
20 was her favorite number. And there's a reason for 20, because 20 was what was on the speedometer when her mother would drive her to school. The 20 was the safest, most comfortable number for her. So 20, 20, 20, and she'd walk around the school and she'd rub her hands together and she'd say 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. That was a great number for her. And then it turned into 12. It went from 20 to 12. I mean, there were different numbers, and now this is not a distant, remote child. This is an engaged child. Like she fully engages with you. So this is not like, so there was no like something very odd because you can't communicate with her. She was really engaging. So long story short, so I write everything down. He takes the paper, goes down to the studio, comes back up about 25 minutes later, and he's got a red pen and he scratches out pee-pee and he puts coffee. And he goes, I can't say pee-pee. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not. And I was like, you got to do what you got to do. Like, I'm all good with that. He was like, okay. So it turned into coffee. And then like, I want to say that, what?
The maple syrup and jam, butterscotch cloud, that's him.
That's him. That's him. He turned the moment into that extraordinary chorus.
The rest of the chorus is him, but the story, the names, all of that is you.
Everything is me. Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly.
And this is how, and I want to get into this more, but this is how he showed you love. Because he was not able to say, I love you in the way you might hope in a traditional relationship. Everything is music. And the way he shows you his fiance love is by taking your story and making this beautiful song out of it.
Well, that was in addition to the I love you that would come, few and far between, but they would come. They would definitely come, like I love you and I love you as well. But this was a deeper connection to, like, it's his way of saying, I heard you. I actually listened to you. I see the deeper part of you. And so that is the bigger validation than even the I love you, which could be in the moment. This experience of writing the song together was him saying, I see you. And and what you've given, what you've shared with me means something deep to me. And and then we solidified the whole thing when he, like, after the day was done and he brought me downstairs and he pressed play, and you hear the school bell ring and there's the song. Then he says, I'm going to go take a shower, you and Susan go do the background vocals. So I went in saying all the background vocals while he was upstairs doing his thing. And it was just like, it just was our moment, like it was just beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it means a great deal to me.
Part of what I learned from talking to all these Prince people who knew him as a child, in his 20s and later years, is this sort of theory of the case. And I want to talk about this for a minute, this sort of notion that guides the book, and then take more of you guys' questions. Holly, thank you so much for that question. And you can put more questions in the Q&A and we can start to deal with that, because we're coming up on 8 o'clock. That Prince grows up with his parents till he's about 10. Then his parents separate. His father moves out. His mother remarries. And he grows to dislike his stepfather very much. And he grows to dislike his mother very much. And he never seems to forgive her throughout his life. He seems to always be bitter about her. When he's a superstar, she's hardly ever around. Everybody knows to not bring her up as a subject. Whereas as an adult, his father is fully embraced. They are traveling the world as Buddhism buddies. His father, Big John Nelson, is a co-writer on several songs on Purple Rain and other albums. So he leaves his mother's house because he wants to leave his mother's house. And in his memoir, he writes about his joy about leaving his mother's house. And then he goes to his father's house. And I always wondered why he left his father's house. And I found out from Morris Day, who was there, that they were not supposed to be bringing girls. They were 12, 13 years old, but they were not supposed to be bringing girls into the house. And they were, and putting the mattress on the floor so it wouldn't squeak, but they got caught. And Big John came in and he said, Skipper, that's what he called Prince, Skipper, put your key on the table and get out. And he kicked Prince out. And there was a short period of time when he didn't have any place to live, but then he ends up in the home of Bernadette Anderson, the mother of Andre Simone, who was part of the early revolution and his early bands. Bernadette Anderson is incredibly maternal and loving. A lot of the people who grew up in Minneapolis around that time find her as to be like a second mother
Right.
to them and a lot of people. And she gives him a lot of space. I think she gives him tremendous encouragement, but a lot of space. She's got 6 kids. She's divorced. She's pursuing an advanced degree. She probably did not have a lot of time to pay attention to him. But he also has this deep-seated sense of wanting to take revenge on his parents for abandoning him. And like, I want to become a superstar, a rock star, to show my mother you should not have abandoned me, and to win my father's love and respect, because his father was a musician. And if I become a rock star, then he will have to respect me. So he's super driven to become a rock star. And he spends his teens and his 20s trying to become a rock star and inhaling all the techniques that you would need to become a rock star. But he's spending all day long doing music, and he's not really developing the interpersonal skills that most of us leave teenagedom with. The basic ability to interact with people. He's far more comfortable on a stage rocking 10,000 people or 100,000 people than one-on-one just talking to somebody. And one-on-one talking to somebody outside of the realm of music, forget about it. So when he becomes a superstar, this drive and this focus on music is super helpful. But by the time he gets into his 40s and he's had a couple of failed marriages, he's lost a baby, he's still just interacting with people on a musical level only. His fans become his real family. He's sort of struggling, right? Like at this point, people are starting to family up, and he's not able to do that. Just the interpersonal skills, the ability to really see another person, like Susannah's talking about, is not really there like it's in a lot of us. And there had been there was a deep need to continue performing because the fans are the family. This is the people who I am connected to, as you might be connected to, your wife, your husband, your kids, your parents. He's connected to the fans in the same way. And he has to keep going. But it's really hard because he's in physical pain. And that seems to have started years earlier. There's a deep level of hip pain. There's a lot of talk about maybe getting hip surgery. It's also in the back, some people say. It's also in the knee, some people say. He's in pain and he has to keep going somehow. And so at some point, this person who assiduously refused to do drugs as a teenager and as a 20 something and in his 20s rock star, in the 80s everybody's doing cocaine. Prince is like, nobody around me can do cocaine. I don't want any drugs around me. I don't want people getting drunk around me. But he starts to do opioids, and it's not about rock star hedonism. It's about, I need to continue working. It's the same sort of motivation of the UPS worker or the factory worker or the nurse who has to get up and go to work to take care of her family, even though her back or his knee or his hip or whatever is killing him. But I have to provide, I have to pay the bills. Prince is just doing that. His hammer and his nails are, the guitar and the pen, and the microphone. And this drags him down. The addiction drags him down to his end. And, near the end, the last few years, the people who loved him were very much like, what is going on? We are reaching out to you. We are trying to help you. But if you're an addict, and I'm an addict, I just don't use anymore. But if you're an addict, you cannot be helped if you don't want to. And this story about the arc of his usage comes to me from so many people who are around him, lots and lots of people who are around him, not just like one person or not some rumor innuendo, but like lots and lots of people were like, we saw this growing, we saw this becoming a monster, we saw him spiraling down, we tried to help him. But Prince is not the sort of person that you could just call. It's not that you can't just go to Paisley Park and knock on the door and be like, yo, I just want to talk to you.
Right.
Once you're out of the circle, you're out of the circle. And Suze, I know that, I mean, you cared deeply for him to the end, but like you couldn't just go there and say like, hey dude, you look sick. How are you?
No, I mean, you couldn't even get him on the phone. You had to call someone else to make sure that that person would get the message to him, and then hopefully you'd get a call back, but you'd get a call back from either the person that you had originally spoken to and not him. And towards the end, it became so remote, like there was no getting in touch with him at all. So that was very difficult. Um, I can only imagine what it was like for everybody in his band in Third Eye Girl and to all the other bands that were before that, that people couldn't sort of reach out. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I can't even speculate. I just don't know. I don't know how anyone else experienced it because not many of us talk about it until he passed. Like, oh, there was something. He was in pain. He was in serious pain. And so, and when Prince is in serious pain, he is very private and not many people are going to know about it. And so it would inevitably turn into something that, addiction is a scary thing that at a certain point the body needs it and you'll do whatever you have to do to get it. So, if that was happening to him, that's what was happening to him. And here we are. So it, it breaks my heart, but I've spoken to many people too, after his passing, that like I wish we'd all had done something or could have done something.
You can't save an addict from themselves. If they don't want to be saved, you can't save them.
I don't know. He may have even wanted to, but at that point, I think that, he had created such a bubble around him, I mean, there's not many people that could penetrate that bubble. Doesn't matter how well you knew him or loved him.
You loved him, and is a really interesting story about how you got engaged. And it's a very long story. And I want to ask you to tell the second half of it because, you guys go to Van Cleef and Arpels, as like, let's just go shopping. And he buys you this gigantic Liz Taylor ring. And there's no comment on what this means. It's just this gigantic engagement ring. And then next thing you know, you're in France, right? About to do scouting for Under the Cherry Moon, the
Right,
movie.
right,
And he says, I want to talk to you.
right. We're staying at the Crillon Hotel, and um, I was I was actually, penned in to be the lead of Cherry Moon, and but I get to Paris, and there's not much talk about it, and there's no script, there's no nothing, there's no talking to me about it. So I was like, I'm here for something else. But he woke me up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, and he sort of like, I gotta talk to you, I gotta talk to you. And so I wake up and I look at him, and he's just pale, like he's just like he's seen a ghost, and he's just sort of like dry mouth and pale and a little bit scared. And I thought he'd seen something or something had happened. Come here, I gotta talk to you about something. I was like, oh, okay. So I get out, and he was come out here on the patio, and it's this, it's overlooking the Arc de Triomphe, and it's just this beautiful, like the sun is coming up right through the arc, and it's a beautiful. He goes, come sit up here, come sit here. And I sit there, and he's like, I have something I want to talk to you about. And I was like, okay. He says, I don't want you to be in the movie. And I was like, okay, okay. And he's, I want you to be my wife. And I was like kind of like that. I was like, well, that's all I mean, yes, of course, like, yes. And it was a big sort of like, and yeah, I mean, I could tell you what happened after that, but that was the moment, and then that things changed dramatically from that point. I mean, I went with him to the south of France, and I'd come back and forth. I'd go fly back and forth. I was fixing up the house. We just bought this house, and I think it was Gilbert who had found the property. He was his manager at the time, and found this property that was so close to where he was building Paisley Park. And so, but it just needed to be done. It needed to be redone, and it needed all this work done on the inside to make it beautiful. So I was back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, we ended up back in Minneapolis when he was done. He hadn't seen the house yet, and it was very exciting. I picked him up at the airport and drove him to the house. He hadn't even seen anything. And we walk in, and all he had asked for, he said, just all I'm going to ask you, if anything, is make sure you get the biggest chandelier you could possibly get. I want the biggest, most beautiful, crystally, sparkly chandelier. So I had a teardrop diamond on my finger. And so I was like, I'm going to find the most beautiful teardrop chandelier. And that sat in the foyer of the house. And as you walked in, and there were windows everywhere, so the light hit it in just a really beautiful way. So that's the first thing he saw when he walked in. And this big, giant smile on his face, just like, wow, look what I got. Like all the work I've done, he'd moved from Kiowa Trails. This was like his first big house after all the work he'd done. And here was this beautiful house. And he also had what, at the time we were, his soon to be wife and a family that he could have together, and the studio that was built downstairs in his home, and he could be creative and he could also love. And it was all of these things that we both shared in common. So it was like it was a great time. It was a great time. And then it ended, but we had a great time.
One more thing, and if you guys have questions, put them in the Q&A box or in the chat. We can see both of those. um, Nothing Compares to You, the title of this book, is a song about you, which seems to be a pretty amazing love song to be, written about you. Is there a story behind the writing of that, or the playing of that for you, or the presentation of that to you, or?
No, not playing it for me, because that was for the family record. So during the time I was about to go and record, I'd flown to back to Los Angeles to do my vocal on that. And David Z had played it in the studio, and he was like, "You're going to be doing the background vocals to this, and you're going to do the co-lead with Paul." And he plays it, and it's the first time I'm hearing Nothing Compares to You, but knowing that I'd just been told this one's about you, but also Sandy Scipione, who was his sort of secretary, a gal who'd worked for him. Her pop got sick and she had to leave. And so he was missing having her, he was missing me, and it turned into Nothing Compares to You, a love song to me, but it was also for Sandy.
Mm, mm,
And when
mm.
I heard it, I mean, it was just,
But it's just,
the fact that I got to sing. Well, so cut to, like, I think it was a year ago when they released the originals and the original demo of Prince singing, and then just my vocal with him on Nothing Compares to You, not Paul's, although I love my brother Paul, but like it's me and Prince doing all those vocals together. And it was just like, for me, that was one of the great moments of my life, to say, like, after his passing, for us to hear us both that way singing that song together was quite something else. If you get a chance to hear that, listen to that on the originals record. It's beautiful, and it's just like, oof, wow.
what's it like singing with him? Because you're a singer,
Yeah,
but like singing with him,
it was
must
a
have been
rarity. Very rarely would you sing, because he was very private when he would do a vocal. He would
right.
close everybody out of the room. He would sit at the board, pull up his mic, and he would do his thing, because in his mind, um, to get a great vocal out, you can't be self-conscious on how you look, right? But here's a guy who's so aware of how he looks, right? I don't want anybody watching me sing my vocals, because
But that makes
what I have to do to this face, to this body, to get that vocal out is incredibly vulnerable. Like it's almost sexual. It's like to get like the ugliest face, like to just get that, he used to say, like, Mahalia Jackson was the perfect example. Like, she'd just get that face, that the spirit would come out of her, but he wouldn't do that in front of you. He'd have to do that in a studio by himself. So it's very, very rare that you would have that experience, right? So, but there were times when he would say, like, come over here, and he'd pull the mic between the two of us, and we would do our thing and we would sing. And it was great. I mean, it was, when he was ready to have it happen, he was great. He wouldn't look you in the eye, and he wouldn't be like, reunited and it feels, like there was no, like, it wasn't looking in your eyes, deep in your eyes. It was like, we're doing the work together, but you're very, very close sharing that space, and if he was doing that with you, you were being very intimate with him. That was as intimate as it gets.
Wow.
My
Wow.
of it.
Yeah, I mean, the studio was this home for him, and Susan Rogers, the engineer, our friend, talked about there was no waiting in terms of the execution for him to get something right. Chuck Zwicky, another engineer, talked about there was no, like, waiting for him to figure out like what he wanted here. He would come in, he would know what he wanted, he would execute it, he would move around the different instruments. Now I'm going to do the drum part, now I'm going to do the bass part, now I'll do the keyboard part, now I'll do the guitar part, now everybody get out, I'll do the vocal. He knew exactly what it was. He would work in the studio until the song was done.
Yeah.
If it took 24 hours, if it took 48 hours, so he would not leave. And this is very unusual, right? He would not leave until it was mastered. So when he left, You have one complete thing that is ready to go out or go into the vault or whatever, or go to somebody else, whatever it may be, but it is done. You know,
Right.
Al,
Yes, mostly that's how it would work. I mean, I have to say, I mean, if it was a 48-hour or even a 24-hour, there would be a period where he would, it would be, I got to take 2 hours. I'm gonna go take a shower and eat something, and then he would tell, okay, if the engineer was on her 24th hour, he would say, get another engineer in here. I'll be back. Or if the engineer would take those 2 hours, there was something happening. It was either changing tape or getting ready for a mix, or, I'll be back. We're going to do another mix. So get all the faders ready. And then he would take a break and come back. So it wasn't like he was in the studio I mean, like he was doing it. He had to have, God bless the engineers, mostly Susan Rogers during my time. But even, um, Peggy McCreary and Pat Leonard and everybody was like, when is this guy going to take a break? Because I need 5 minutes myself. But most of the time they wouldn't get the break. He would leave to go get a dinner break, take a shower, come back dressed again and ready to go another 12 hours.
and
But yes, then it would be complete. And then after mixing, you would take a drive over to Bernie Grudman to the mastering lab, and you would sit there and you would go through mastering with him. And then it would be mastered. He'd take it to Cavallo Ruffalo that next day, and he'd be like, it's done. Let's do something with this. I mean, it was moving. The machine was moving at all times. He could
and
hear everything.
but he was an insomniac, right?
I don't think it was insomnia because he could sleep when he would sleep. He was out. It was drive. It was adrenaline. So what would keep him awake was not the stress of I can't sleep. It was I got to get this creative expression out. I got to do the work. And so he couldn't sleep until the work was done. So, and I don't think that constitutes insomnia. I think that's just drive. So, but he could go 48 hours. I don't know about towards the end of his life if he needed more sleep or less sleep. I don't know. But back then it was he could go good 2 days and lots of cake, lots of Toblerones, lots of constant comet tea with as much honey as you could possibly put in it, and like he'd be going. So famous Amos cookies and nachos and like okay, and every once in a while it would be like pick up a cheeseburger in the middle of the night and then come back to the studio. But you know, eating a lot of heavy food would make him sleepy. So
Brendan asked an interesting question. If Prince recognized any guitarists as influences or songwriters, and I wonder what you think about that. I know a lot of us from the outside, from the beginning, when you rage from fame to mega fame, with the purple and all that, immediately everyone said, "Oh, Jimi Hendrix." And the James Brown influence was clear, but when you put Prince beside Little Richard, it's like, oh well, that's his musical father, Little Richard. They are so similar.
They're only similar, and this is coming from me. They're only similar because they both wore great makeup and they had great hair and they were great showmen. But like in terms of songwriting, no, it's a totally different thing. Prince
Yeah,
was influenced by songwriters like Joni Mitchell. He was influenced by,
yeah.
um, um, when we would talk about records and songs. I mean, he was influenced by, I mean, it ran the gamut. And I mean, guitar players were one thing, but songwriters were another. I mean, he loved the Chambers Brothers. He loved Sly Stone.
Yeah.
Um, um, he loved Joni Mitchell. I mean, songwriters like that. Those were the kinds of influences, that he would listen to and say, "There's song structure there." Marvin Gaye, like Al Green, like songwriters. You could hear the songwriters that he was like, where I that's what I, like I'm looking to in terms of like his performance. Like, sure, I mean, it could be Jackie Wilson, it could be,
Yeah.
it could be all these different people that he'd watch the Tammy Show all
Mm.
the time. Like when he, I mean, this is something that we watch all the time. He had tapes, VHSs of the Tammy Show. We'd watch all these great performances. So he learned by watching those great performers. But in terms of like his sort of like expression of songwriting, that was a whole other thing. Like you know, songwriters were, there were some that were really meaningful to him. In terms of guitar players, he loved Santana. He loved more than Hendrix. It was Santana who was an influence to him. And,
Um,
and Miles Davis was a huge influence musically for him.
Huge, huge. Lawrence has an interesting question. And Lawrence was at the tribute at First Avenue after he passed away, where you sang, and where Wendy sang and played the lead on Sometimes It Snows in April. And that first night, she broke down crying the first time through that song because it was just so painful and crazy to sing that song in that moment. Uh, Lawrence's question is, do you have a Prince song that that reminds you most of him? I mean, I guess I would say it in this way. If I said, Susannah, you got to play a Prince song right now in your house. Like as soon as the Zoom ends, you got to go listen to a Prince song. Anyone, what one would you choose first?
You know, this is going to sound odd, but there's always been one song that has broken my heart that he recorded, and it's called Another Lonely Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
That song for me, it was, and even when I heard it in 1984, I wept. I was like, that's him. That encapsulates so much of him and his psychic energy, his, for lack of, for lack of knowledge at the time. I mean, I think that it was an emotional pain. He spent a lot of lonely nights alone because, this is a guy who couldn't ask for what he wanted. He'd take it before he could ask for it. So if he were lonely, it wouldn't be, he wasn't calling and saying, I'm lonely. I want to, can I come over for Christmas? Or there was none of that. So that particular song, again, was another way that I think I really felt uh, he spoke. He clearly talked about how he felt. And I love,
That
when you
that
listen to it, it's
song
heartbreaking.
that song slays me.
Yes.
Especially when you get down to the discussion of why she died. And he
Yes.
said, I just say you were dead. And the doctor said you were dead, and I say it's simplest. And I'm just,
It's utterly heartbreaking.
and
And I
I
remember hearing
drink
it
banana
was,
dacquari till I'm blind. Oh my God. Like,
no, I know, I know. And it was 30 below zero at the time. It was, it was like 10 o'clock at night. And I found the tape in the car. And I was driving around in the car and I put the tape on and that's what I heard. And I was by myself when I heard it. I was like, oh, I mean, it literally took my breath away, took my breath away. And I've
that's
always felt that way. I mean, even I listen to it now and I'm like, nah, people aren't going to get it as much as I get it. But like that particular song for me just breaks my heart.
that song kills me. It's in my like top two or three. Um, and How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore?
Oh,
Because it's so bluesy and simple. It's just him and the piano. It's like it's so powerful in like how he could create such great music from so little.
well, he was one of the great um, turners of a phrase.
Mhm.
And not many people can do that. He could take, like, he's an extraordinary songwriter, and he could really, like, I mean, everything from Raspberry Beret to How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore to, I mean, I Want to Be Your Lover to, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. the songs and the choruses and how he could turn a phrase and the melody lines that would switch in and out to the lead line. I mean, that's a gift. That's not just, oh, I studied that. That's a gift. It's really a gift.
So that's one of the key points in the book. I think Morris Hayes from the NPG asks Prince, "What is your greatest talent?" Because you're, every instrument you produce, you sing,
Right.
and Prince says, "Lyric writing. That is what I am best at. At the end of the day, I am a poet, and there's no throwaway lyrics in this oeuvre. All these songs are deeply well written,
Yeah.
and even like
You know how rappers, like great rap artists, can turn a phrase like that. I mean, you say, okay, let's have these two rap artists, doing the verses, and they're sitting behind the mic, and the radio host goes, okay, go for it. Here's the theme, and they just start going, and they go, and they go, and it just comes out of them. Imagine that exact talent, then also adding the melody line to it, and also a chorus to it. Like, it was just moving quickly. Where, like, for me, I get in front of a piece of paper and a pen, and I'm like, okay, here's the first line. I'm like, I mean, like the pause. He didn't have any pauses. Like, what comes next? It just remarkable.
the writing was just flow.
Boom. Hey, that goes with that. That's with that. That means something to me here. Just listen to Witness for the Prosecution, and like all these songs that are the abstract songs he did. It was like boom, boom, boom. Goes in for a half hour to an hour, after the music is done, and has the lyric completed. And you're like, how does he get that done so fast? Boom, done. And then it's put on the, on the piano or wherever, in the studio on the board, and he's just like, okay, lead vocal, done. Wow, what? It's incredible.
Incredible is a great word to leave this on, because he was incredible. Talking to you and listening to you tell these stories is incredible. I could listen to you all night long, and there's times when I have, and it's 8:30, so we're going to let the folks go. But thank you so much for all the folks who came to be part of this. Thank you, Susannah, for once again opening up your heart and sharing these stories. You spent a significant portion of your life with a major historical figure, and your memories are really valuable to us in terms of unlocking further who he was, because he was a part of so many of our lives.
Yeah.
And your insight helps us understand him, and thus ourselves, because he lives in all of our hearts, a little bit better. And thank you to my favorite bookstore, Greenlight, for putting this on and helping us do this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Touré and Susannah. It was so great to listen to you. Just a reminder, I've dropped the link in the chat. The book is Nothing Compares to You, brand new this week. So you can read more stories there and continue the conversation. So thank you guys so much. Have a great evening. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.